All right, day 18 of the Lindsay Clancy trial. By the way, thank you to everybody that's following, but I'm just stating facts of what the court case is looking like, and yeah, you can make up your mind. So I've got my computer to the side for notes because this was a big one. Didn't want to forget anything. Here we go. First up, the defense calls this final witness Dr. Philip Resnick. I didn't know this, but it really matters the order that you bring up witnesses, because you want your last witness to be somebody that the jury remembers. Kind of equated it to when you go to a concert and that last song, the big song, is usually the one everyone knows. This is the same for courtrooms. So why does it make sense that Resnick is the last witness? Because this guy is literally the specialist in this field of parents unaliving children. He's studied this field for decades. He's looked at more than 80 cases. He's been on so many court trials and cases. The person that specializes in the reasons why parents unalive them. He's got 5 categories that he talks about. And I was a little bit concerned because I thought, okay, does he just stamp everybody as psychotic? No, he doesn't. There are many different cases that he believes are for other reasons. Interestingly, this is what he thinks of Lindsay. He says, after doing all his research, so this guy talked about interviewing her and her parents, the medical and psychiatric records, journals, medications, police records, even what she Google searched. She even talked to the staff at the hospital that she was at. And after all of that research, Resnick says that Lindsay had bipolar 2 with severe depression. And on the day the children died, he believes she was psychotic. He believes the male voice was something called a command hallucination. He believes that she felt like something outside of her was controlling her. And he says that all the psychological testing that he did with her showed no evidence that she was faking her symptoms. In fact, he believed that at times she tended to minimize them. So his ultimate opinion is that Lindsay was mentally ill to the point that she was not criminally responsible. Pretty strong final witness for the defense. But fun lawyer thing number 2, prosecution gets chances to also cross-examine the witness, and the prosecution starts grilling him. Basically, they say, command hallucinations can be fake. You actually wrote about this in your thesis and your theories and your study. You even said in your studies that when somebody genuinely hears a command, they don't necessarily obey it. So why couldn't Lindsay resist? Also say Lindsay had been asked by doctors about harming her children and she didn't disclose her thoughts. They challenge his idea that there was no other motive. They're like, just because Lindsay didn't tell you there was another motive doesn't mean that another one didn't exist. They question the postpartum timeline. How far after birth can you reasonably call somebody postpartum? They bring up Andrea as well, and they're like, wait. You diagnosed her with psychosis and she looked completely different to what Lindsay's presenting, because Andrea had way more hospitalizations and S attempts and really obvious psychotic symptoms before she unalived her children. So essentially, the prosecution, from what I understood, was saying, hey, you might be the expert in this area, but does Lindsay actually fit what you're describing? Okay, and then that was done, and defense pretty much says, Your Honor, defense case rests. Prosecution 5 minutes later bring up their final witness, and it's this guy, Dr. Avram Mack. Basically, they need him to explain, who are you, what did you look at, and why did you come to a completely different conclusion? And they establish he's a forensic psychiatrist who's brought into the case through these people. He personally interviewed Lindsay. Another psychiatrist was with him for that interview. And then they get into Lindsay, they ask about her history, and he diagnoses her with major depressive disorder. And they basically say, did you see bipolar 2? No. Did you see evidence of hypomania? No. Because even though there was this increased exercise after her youngest was born, he did not consider that information or evidence of hypomania. Then the big question, they said, was Lindsay psychotic? And his opinion is essentially that the evidence did not support the defense's version of psychosis. And the prosecution's like, why? And he says, well, go through Lindsay's day. There was a doctor appointment that she went to. She knew about medication and CVS and dinner and texts and normal conversations and planning. And he's like, if she could think, plan, organize, make decisions, then... And then they get into that male voice, and Dr. Mack's point is basically, just because you hear a voice, it doesn't automatically mean that you don't know right from wrong or can't control yourself. Then there's the go to God bit, and Lindsay said to Mack that she said to the children, go to God. Mack's perspective, he's like, it suggests she understood what was happening to them. Then he also focuses on the voice allegedly saying last chance, and his interpretation is that suggests some awareness that Patrick returning would stop what was happening. After all those questions, prosecution gets Mack exactly where they need him. Lindsay mentally ill? Yes. Was she depressed? Yes. Her opinion, Dr. Mack? She still understood right from wrong. Now TV show courtroom drama happens because Reddington gets up to cross-examine Mac. Here's where things get really testy really quickly. They're talking over each other. The judge has to step in. Reddington basically goes, right, before we can trust your opinion, let's look at you. Reddington establishes that Mac is being paid by the prosecution. So that itself is completely normal. Expert witnesses do get paid. But then Reddington asks how Mac actually got his job, and he says he was retained through these guys. And this is where my ears were kind of like, ooh, because Park Dietz is a famous forensic psychiatrist. And remember Andrea Yates from earlier? Well, he testified for the prosecution in Yates' first trial, and his testimony later became a major issue because he incorrectly referenced a Law and Order episode, and then Yates's conviction was ultimately overturned. Reddington was like, but who did you actually interview? And he's like, Lindsay. And he's like, but you didn't interview her family or her co-workers or other people that know her. But back to Mac's CV, because Reddington goes down this path of questioning that's so interesting. And he's basically saying, you're giving this jury an opinion about postpartum psychosis. So how much experience do you actually have with this topic? And Mac says, I'm a generalist. And he estimates he's treated about 10 women with postpartum psychosis since 2001. Then Reddington starts testing how well Mac actually knows Lindsay's history. He's like, what were her jobs, her medications, her pregnancies? Why was she so anxious about returning to work? And so on and so forth. And then he catches Mac on this word, lifelong.
Well, on page 8, what I had written was, Ms. Clancy's reluctance to take medication generally was accompanied by her concern for medications entering her breast milk. So the general...
breast milk, she's pregnant. Come on. That's the only time that she indicates that she did not want to take, except for benzos.
So Mac had described Lindsay as having a lifelong reluctance to medication. And Reddington basically goes, lifelong, where did you get that? And then they check Mac's own report. And what they find is Lindsay saying she didn't want medication getting into her breast milk. So Reddington pushes so hard, essentially saying, are you making this up? Judge strikes that.
Concerns as a mother about her breast milk and having these drugs get into an infant's body. When else did she tell you that she was resistant, as you just told this jury, to taking medication? Like she's somebody who doesn't want to take the medication, doesn't care to take the medication. Where is it?
Overruled. Well, I didn't say that she didn't care.
Okay, how about if she was resistant?
My recollection, and I'm happy to, if you would like me to spend time finding it.
Prove you're wrong, I
to.
know.
What?
Prove you're wrong. It's not in your report, though, is it?
Okay.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
And this is what I think Reddington is doing. Not necessarily needing Mac to change his opinion. He needs the jury to be thinking, how thorough is this man when he investigated Lindsay? How much postpartum experience does he actually have? And if he overstated one detail, what else might he be overstating? And then as Reddington is like getting properly into Mac, it's now like 4 p.m. their time. And the judge basically goes, all right, that's enough for today. So Mac is still on the stand. Reddington is not finished cross-examining him. Judge reminds the jury, keep an open mind, don't watch anything, don't research anything. In fact, the judge says this every single time, and the court finishes for the weekend. Ooh.